I'm here with Karen Cadenhead, and a good place to start might be for you to introduce yourself and give an overview of what kind of illnesses you've wrestled with, and in particular, the cancer.
Okay, I'd be happy to. I think it was 18 months ago. I went into the doctor and was complaining. I had a few symptoms, and he seemed to get alarmed and thought I should have a colonoscopy. And I kept coming up with reasons why we shouldn't. Like I think it's just this, or anyway. I went in. I had the colonoscopy, and it was one morning. My husband was out of town and I decided to take myself out to breakfast in sunny California. It was a beautiful day. I was outside having eggs, and the phone rang. And it was this doctor. And he said, "I'm sorry. This is very bad news I have to give you. It's cancer. And I think we need to get started right away. I've already set you up with someone, and it's going to be a course of chemo and radiation. And we'll do some scans and stage you and see how bad it is." And it was just at that moment, everything changed. And I actually felt at that moment I had a decision to make about how I was going to cope with this. So I guess what I'm going to talk about is how my view of life and disease has been informed by this 18-month journey so far.
Which started for you in a coffee shop or in a breakfast place while you
Yeah.
were having breakfast,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you're alone.
Yeah. And I think in retrospect, I'm happy that it happened that way, because it's a big deal when you tell your family. And I had the luxury. I thought to myself, I'm not going to call my husband because he's not home for 10 hours. And I don't want to do this to him on the phone that was just done to me. Um, I mean, of course, you're in shock, I guess. But then I just found my mind wandering to people I knew who had cancer. And there were two or three that I had really admired. And I was trying to think what I admired about them, and then I thought, could I be like one of them? I mean, who do I want to be? I mean, am I going to be just miserable? Am I going to be, strong in a fake way? Am I going to, I just didn't know. And so I actually called one of my friends with cancer. I'd forgotten I did that right away.
Mm.
And I wanted to know how she had dealt with it. It's kind of vague now, but I'd said I'd admired her, because I don't want to say that strong is what you want. It wasn't strong, but maybe realistic, um, smart about it, not self-pity really. I just, I wanted to do it right. And I wasn't sure what right meant at that point.
It's almost like you have to put on a new set of clothes now that your reality has completely changed and you don't know which clothes are going to fit best for you.
How true. That's really true. And then I started thinking, I have a pretty big family with three siblings and a mother that's still alive. She's 95 now. And I'm thinking, oh, they're gonna just flip. I mean, the first thing you think, someone has cancer, they're gonna die. That's just,
Hmm.
and I thought, this is gonna just kill my husband. And the boys, oh, what are they gonna do? My two grown boys. So I thought, I I don't think I can talk to them all. How can you possibly talk to everybody? So I think I'll write them. I do a practice letter first, and I'll say, this is what's happened. We don't know anything yet, but I feel pretty emotional and I just need some time. But I want you to know what's going on.
And you sent that out via
I think that
email?
all my siblings, and then a few days later, I did that with close friends, because I thought, oh, you know how how it flies. When you know somebody's
Right.
really sick, it flies. So I thought, okay, they're going to be upset if they don't know. But after we told the first person, they called the next day and the next day and the next day, and they're going, "How is she now? What's happening now?" And so that then became another issue, how to disseminate information.
You're really managing the people around you and your loved ones and your friends. And at the same time, you're trying to put the building blocks together for how am I going to handle this? How
You're
does
right.
that work?
And I'm a therapist. I should know better. Well, I think, well, let's back up. And I had to tell my husband, and then I had to tell the kids, and I had to do that. Uh, One of them, sadly, was in New York, so it had to be on the phone. Um, the other one came over, and uh, I was not prepared for how dramatically this would affect their lives. I mean, I should have been, but my illness became about them, oddly enough. I mean, each one has his own reality. I might lose my mom. That's I mean, they were just devastated, and they, of course, thought I was just gonna die soon. Um, and then I think the good part was that I had a wonderful husband and have a wonderful husband, and we cried all the time. So I was doing my grieving. We just kept crying and thinking about not being together. I think he was scared to death just to lose me. And I mean, it's interesting when you're the star of your own movie, kind of. It's a little different for you. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, I was scared, but I think I would have rather been me than him. You know, anticipating if I thought I was going to lose him, that would be far worse than anything I had to go through, I think. And then I did weird things in my head, like thought, he's better equipped to live alone than I am.
Hmm. Hmm.
He's more resilient, I felt that he would ultimately be all right. But the boys, wow, this was a marker event in their lives. It threw them both off course completely. It was
How do you maintain your identity as the patient who, in some ways, I assume you're the one most in need of care, and yet you're also in this caregiver role, taking care of the people around you who depend on you and for whom what you said, I think, is it becomes all about them.
Yeah. Well, of course, I didn't know all that at the time. um, and there's a lot of time in the day to think about the whole range of things. You can multitask, and you can have a lot of feelings. Um, so I'll have to go back and read some of my notes because it does evolve. Um, then the boys, what I mean, I'm really happy that we went public so quickly, because I know a lot of people who don't. I mean, I encountered people that had kept their cancers private for 10 years.
Well, and why, Karen? Why are you feeling like it was the right decision to go public quickly?
Um, because I mean, I'm not in a position like some people where maybe your job's at stake. Maybe I had nothing really to lose, and I had everything to gain by the support I got.
While you were managing the people around you and communicating, you also had to figure out the the few or many things you had to decide for yourself. Can you talk about some of those things that you did? Like, what were the building blocks you had to move around and build on for your own well-being?
It's hard to pick which thing we're talking about because first you've got to realize there had to be major information gathering. That was
Mm.
almost before anything. There was that panicky. I didn't particularly want to go to the hospital where that doctor had arranged everything for me. And my whole family are researchers. A couple of doctors are in the family. And so it was, and he had given us the impression we didn't have a lot of time to mess around.
So
You
what
know,
was so yeah, because you didn't say the severity of the diagnosis. You said it was cancer, but what was the doctor telling you?
it was. I don't know if these things even mean anything to you. It was a stage. It started out as a stage 1 with some lymph node involvement. So that's never good.
Yeah. So
But
lymph node involvement means that the cancer has metastasized to the lymphatic system.
yeah.
And through the lymphatic system, it can really then, spread anywhere across your body.
And there were some unknown spots in my lungs, and they didn't know if that was anything. But it was something to be concerned about. That part didn't really matter because the treatment protocol for anal cancer is always the same. It's horrible. It's one of the worst things apparently, it's one of the hardest next to throat and neck cancer. So it was going to be chemo and radiation for 6 weeks, no matter what.
And no surgery.
No, thank goodness. Now I've
Yeah.
subsequently learned a lot of people in my situation did have surgery. And so I'm not sure. Here's the funny thing. I'm dealing with a rare cancer, which I soon learned. And with rare cancers, nobody's seen enough to know what's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, that's why it was really crucial. We figured at my major San Francisco hospital um, that they would have been a place that saw a lot of it. I
Mhm.
subsequently learned not so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you find, some of the things I wish I'd known, but it wouldn't have changed that initial surgery. I mean, the initial treatment, it wouldn't have changed it. So there's that. But I think what's interesting, my family just went into high gear, sending out the word to everyone. This is what she's got. Do you know anybody?
Mm.
And lots of stuff came back. Lots of really, I mean, crowdsourcing is the greatest thing in the world. I mean, you just shouldn't keep this to yourself. And I was probably one of those people that would have said, oh, let's just go over to the local hospital. It's close, it'll be easy. I didn't get it. I just didn't get it. How there is a range of treatment, there's a range of institutions with good equipment and well trained staff. And there's sweet, casual community hospitals that just don't have any, and they're all reluctant to tell you that they haven't had much experience dealing with this. Everybody wants to, and in my case, I think my life depended on this. It was a big deal, but that's down the road.
Yeah, but what's really interesting to me is that even as you're managing the relationships and keeping people informed from a sort of psycho-emotional level, keeping your relationship strong and letting people know what's going on with you, what you're saying is you're at the same time crowdsourcing and creating this brain trust that's going to give you feedback and potentially some life-saving information.
Wow, yeah. And whoa, and I haven't even talked about when you first go in and you start uh meeting. I mean, let's just fast forward to I've had the scans, which are intense for sure. And I've found the new doctor who I think should see me the next day. And the whole process took like a month before I could get in. And by then I am a wreck. And I'm thinking, it's growing. Hello.
Right,
I could
right.
die before you see me. It was just unbelievable to me that everybody's so casual. And then once I go in and meet the doctor, she says, well, we've got to get you on that infusion schedule. What? Well, the tumor board's not meeting for another week. And then we have, eh, it's just, it was defied imagination to me that I felt like I could literally die while waiting. Who does that? This
Right.
is America. This is San Francisco. It was just shocking. And to this day, I don't know if that hurt. Um, we had another
Well, it,
interest.
it can't it can't be good to wait for a month,
Right, it can't be
right?
good.
When you have something growing and
That has
metastasizing in
grown
you.
too long anyway. Right,
Yeah.
right, yeah. There were a lot of turns in the road where I could have ended up very angry. There were some amazing things that happened. And yet for some reason, I didn't get angry. And I'm so glad I didn't, because I think it would have only hurt me, hurt my health, to get that kind of, I mean, yes, that month I was a wreck. I was more anxious than angry. But um, once treatment starts, you think, what was I in a hurry for? Because
Right.
it's so
Right.
brutal. So
Yeah.
uh, there's that.
So has your perspective changed at all in things you did right or wrong in the early days? And I understand this would be different for every person under the rainbow, but for you, is there a way to look back and say, these 2 or 3 things were really things I wish I'd done differently? Or alternatively, these 2 or 3 things were just the perfect thing, and I'm so glad I had the presence of mind or luck to do them.
Well, I do have some perfect things, but I'm still grappling with that question. And the reason is my husband recently heard from a colleague who said, anal cancer is such an icky, y- y- it's just not the one you want to talk about. It's not pretty
Right.
somehow. Somehow it's worse in a
Yeah.
way. And so a colleague Lauren didn't know very well called and said, I have a colleague who has a cancer like your wife's. And I wondered if you had some advice. And,
Mm.
come to find out it was his wife, but he couldn't open up about it. And so we were both flooded with information we wanted to give them, and they wanted to go to the community hospital. Wouldn't it just be easier if we went down the street and we had 100 reasons why they shouldn't? If they drove just 45 minutes, they could be at one of the best centers in the world. And
Yeah.
they wanted to do the local one because it was easier. It's 6 weeks.
Right.
And
Right.
it's you can have the keys to the castle if you go to the big hospital, the brand new equipment, the everything, the top people that have, they've clearly been skimmed off, to get a plum job like that. Um,
Mhm.
well, and then we had so much advice we wanted to give. And I said, wait a minute. They, I couldn't have handled all this information. You got to go slow with people. Would it have been good for me to know all this back then? I don't think so. This is baby steps. I mean, you have to sit with the person and find out where they are and move them forward a bit. Now, maybe you could talk to their healthcare giver, advocate, friend, family, a little more about details. But then I think, okay, if we were going to prioritize, the absolute most important thing is to get them in a good hospital with a doctor that's as skilled as possible. That
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
first. Um, and I would have said, you've got to get organized while you have energy. I
Yeah.
mean, you've got to set up, you've got to think through, you've got to do your research, you've got to think about the foods, the medications, the number of people, set up your infrastructure, get a notebook, have dividers. I could not keep track of all the people. You see, in my case, I saw a radiation person, I saw a nutritionist, I saw the oncologist. I um, I had to go get a port put in. I had to go to the different X-ray, the PET scans and I was confused where I mean, luckily my husband is just so good with all that. If I'd had to get myself there and organize all that, um, I think I would have just, and then let's say you're having a side effect. Well, who do you call? I didn't even know. It turns out there's a team for radiation. There's a team for oncology. And then a neighbor told me there's a palliative care doctor you can call. No one told
Mm.
me to, but she said they're a lot more empathetic. Go with her. Palliative care is not just for the dying. It's a care. It's a symptom management. Well, you can go on Zoom with them for a whole hour and talk about anything, any side effect you've got. And here was another tip. Um, when you go through radiation over and over, you have skin problems, really horrible. It's burns, really, you're struggling with. And the nurses are trained. They have 3 or 4 major medications they'll always recommend. But I wasn't getting better. And in fact, it felt like the medication was making me worse. And so my husband says, you know, my best friend's son is head of dermatology at this hospital. Let's call him. I thought, oh, but wouldn't that be a betrayal? I mean, I'm not supposed to, am I? Go
Yeah.
outside this, I don't know, you
Yeah,
get
there's
kind
all this psychological thing about
yeah,
being
yeah, like, they'll
loyal
be
to your
mad at me.
doctor and, being a good student,
Yeah,
being a
yeah, yeah,
good
yeah.
patient.
Yeah, and I should
Yeah.
just put on more cream. So I go in and I see the pro for skin disorders, and she goes, "Oh, you're allergic to this cream. It's the additives." So I'll
Oh
just give
my
you an
goodness.
additive-free version, over and over. It's what you don't know. You can't even ask the question because you can't even
Yeah.
imagine. And again, it goes to show, expand your base of people. Keep talking about, I know it's not a lot of people's nature. But if you put it out there, what you're struggling with, you start. And that's where joining a group, finding a buddy, people that are going through the same thing or something close to now, I mean, you could join a chemo group, you could join a cancer group, you could join an immunotherapy group, you could join a slow medicine group, you could join an off label group, and they all have different things to suggest. And you have to, and then when you start not feeling good, you can't do your own research anymore.
Well, yeah, and I think you're making a really good point, or you made it earlier about being really organized, getting that notebook with the dividers in it and keeping track of everything because obviously you're going to be suffering the mental effects of being under treatment also. And there are moments when it's probably going to be confusing, it's going to be too much. And having a good system of organization can make a huge difference, I
Yeah,
imagine.
and I did another funny thing. I put up, just by a fluke, we I live on a houseboat dock. And so we have a lot of neighbors. And one of my neighbors said, wouldn't it be fun if we have a mermaid group where everyone that's an artist, or likes crafts or stuff, that we meet once a week? And so we had just gotten started. I didn't even know half the women on the dock were liked art. And so I said, oh, let's have it at our house because I have a nice big table. And so we had been having the best time ever. And then I got diagnosed, and thank God, because then it kept on going. The group just kept coming. But I asked them for things like they're artists. And I said, I want to make big posters of each month. And I want to cross them off. I want to tape them up in my room by my bed. And I want to look and see how I've crossed off, 4 weeks. And I've just got 2 more to go. And so, they made these big calendars for me, for one thing. That was just a little example. Um, I there was a lot more I wish I'd known about the medication. I think
Hmm.
in medicine, they wait till you have the complaint and then they order the medicine. And then the pharmacist slowly fills it. And by
Yeah.
then you've had, 24 hours of screaming pain. And then suddenly you take the pain pill and you start vomiting because nobody mentioned that you're going to get nauseated. And so then you have to wait again to get the anti-nausea pill. And then after you've taken that, you discover you're so constipated, you can't believe it because nobody told you it would constipate you. And so then you have to wait till you can talk to another doctor to explain you've got it. And then they have to see what you should be taking for it. And you should tell somebody that in about 1 second. Okay, these are the pills you're going to need, right? Let's just line you up. But it was weeks before I met my palliative care doctor through a neighbor. And so, boy, that I just tell everybody that I know is going to go through this, that you just consider everything as constipating pretty much that they're
Yeah.
going to give you. And that if you take any pain meds, there's a high likelihood you're going to get really nauseated. I just can't even believe this isn't still just protocol.
Yeah, and I wonder how many people feel like that going through a protocol and feeling like a lab rat as you're having these reactions, calling someone, waiting, getting something to counter the reaction, but then
Well,
that causes another reaction.
and it's usually the husband that's trying to make the call because you're crying and
Yeah, yeah,
help, get them, get them, get them, and then everybody's panicking. Such needless stress,
yeah,
right? It could all
yeah.
be, it's a shame. Now, to their credit, if you look on some of these medications like a chemo, um, there's probably 40 side effects you could have. And, this poor nursing team doesn't know which
Yeah,
thing you're
yeah,
dealing with. And so you gradually you come around to feeling sorry for them, really, because everybody's got a different symptom. And some are, they'll say, wow, haven't seen that before, but it could be that. So,
so it seems to make sense to also be really bold if you can with your questions. What are the side effects I might get? Should I get something prophylactically in case that side effect comes up? Because it might add a few dollars, but at least then it's in the cupboard instead of in the pharmacy waiting for two
yeah,
days while I'm suffering over the toilet.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, I think well, everybody needs an advocate. But once again, we didn't know what to ask.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
the hard part. So much of this journey. And you take even the radiologist, she's not entirely clear with what you're going through over in chemo. She knows what she's doing with you.
Hmm.
Uh, and she was great. She was really experienced and sensitive. And we were so touched, she gave us her personal email. I can't tell you, we never used it, but it meant so much not to be a number,
Yeah,
So that was these, so there we start with the acts of kindness. These small acts of kindness meant everything. Oh, you treated me like a human.
yeah. Karen, you've built a big community around yourself. And I imagine you had a big one around yourself prior to cancer.
Not as
But not as
I
much?
didn't know. I didn't know I had it. I think we all have it, but we don't know we have it and we're afraid to ask.
Would you consider your medical team as part of that community?
Hmm. I don't know.
I didn't plan on asking you that, but I was just curious because you mentioned this doctor giving you her personal email address, and I was wondering how you think about it.
Yeah. Sadly, no. And that was my dream. Now, I've had some
Yeah.
experiences along the way, because of COVID, because my first treatments didn't work, um, and we got in a clinical trial, so we had to fly to Nashville
Mhm.
once a month for that experience. So we met another group of people, and then when COVID hit, we did kind of a temporary gig in Sacramento, and there I met the woman I would want to put in my circle. And we became friends and we still write. The doctor I saw there. I only saw her for 2 months, but she did the simplest things. And I wrote her and told her. The first thing she did, is she told me about herself. And then she showed me a picture of her 5-year-old twins.
Mm.
And I mean, she says, oh, they're always giving me the hardest time. The little boys like this, little girls like this. And then I had a very bad reaction to one of the immunotherapy drugs. And she explained it to me in a way no one had before. And then she gave me a story of hope about an elderly man who had had the same drugs and had the same bad reaction. And first they stopped one, then they stopped the other, and he didn't progress for a solid year. And she begged him to let her do a biopsy of the remaining tumors that showed up on the scans. And she said, when I did, there was no cancer in those tumors. It was just immunotherapy.
Oh, wow.
And I just hung on to that story. I don't know if you've ever heard of Bernie Siegel. Dr. Bernie Siegel was very popular 30,
Yes.
40 years ago. What did he write?
Mhm.
miracle medicine and
Yes.
whatever. And he cited the story when a patient comes to you with a serious cancer or something else, you take their hand and you say, I know this is scary, but I'm going to be with you all the way. And there's always hope, no matter how bad this gets. And I'm going to introduce you to someone with your cancer who survived. And that stayed with me. And I kept looking for that doctor.
Mm,
And this woman came the closest, but because of the study rules, I couldn't see her more than twice. So
interesting.
I ended up going off the study because COVID just goes on, and we weren't going to risk. And miracles, the insurance paid for the drugs. So I got to stay on them.
In these days, that is a miracle.
You're
Yeah.
right. Yay, Medicare.
Yeah. Yeah. Karen, I want you to talk a little bit about community, if you don't mind. And one of the things I think people struggle with is being the center of attention for too long. You know, you know people's lives are busy, and you must wonder internally, how am I impacting my relationships, and am I putting myself out there too much? Am I being a bother or a pain?
Right.
How do you manage that
That is
internally?
that's a tough needle to thread. And I did think about that. I mean, I have no problem. I think all my friends would say I'm one of the most open people they know. But by the same token, so I thought I came up with a very clever way to do this. I had seen these care pages, and I'd been on two or three. I found them kind of hard to negotiate,
Hmm.
navigate, and there's always a little candle burning in the picture, and it felt like you only went to a care page when they were near death.
Yeah, some of those things feel like a funeral is already happening,
You're right.
even when someone's alive and just telling you how they're
You
doing.
were a lovely
Yeah,
person. And
yeah,
so I didn't know any other place to go, frankly. And yet we could not manage all these people. And, it's not like I think Facebook's the way to go, because lots of my friends now are off Facebook for a lot of political reasons. They're just angry, or they don't like what it's become. But
mhm,
I didn't know what else to do. And,
mhm,
at my age, I mean, to have a blog, I just didn't know if I could find it, much less.
yeah,
So I decided, through my kids, I said, can I do a private Facebook group where I will only invite people that seem interested? And they said, oh, yeah, you can be the administrator, and you can. Um, and so I wanted to make it really clear that no one had to respond, that I
yeah.
just wanted to give updates, but I would welcome responses. I didn't care if and a few friends said they'd call me anyway and say, oh, how are you doing? I'm not on Facebook anymore. And it would tick me off a bit.
Oh, it
I
would.
said, I'm fine. It's like, clearly you don't want to know more, or you would go to the trouble to look at what I wrote. So
Yeah,
that still bothers me a little. And I have
yeah.
two friends that are on Facebook that copy what I wrote, print it out, and give it to the people that are not on
Oh,
Facebook.
how nice.
Silly. Okay, so I started out inviting people I knew would want to be on, and that's just family, close friends. And it wasn't very many. I mean, 30 people, maybe.
Mhm.
And they were eagerly looking for updates. And I didn't worry about what I wrote because I knew they loved me. And I went in the weeds a lot, just explaining everything that was happening, explaining the things I was worried about. Um, I knew the boys were reading it. I wasn't always happy about that. Um, it's funny. You have a couple of audiences.
Yeah,
Your girlfriends, you could say one thing, and your children, you say something else. And even my siblings found this all a little hard to handle. And they're much more introverted than me. So
yeah,
they didn't want to write on the page, you know, they would just look at it. And so I didn't really know if they saw it or not, but of course they saw it,
yeah.
you know. So then I would have people that expressed an interest, and I would say, well, I have this Facebook group if you want. Yeah, I'd love to be included. So I would add them. And then what was the other thing that would happen? A couple of times, somebody said, would you care if I invite my friend? She would benefit from this.
Oh,
And
that's really nice.
I would say that would be great. Oh, here's what was really important. I started thinking as the word got out, you know how in different phases of your life you have a different friend group.
Yeah.
Like when you worked at that job when you were 20, you
Yeah.
probably had
Yeah.
your best work buddy friend. And then
Yep.
as you move on in your life, you just don't keep up, but you love them to death. So I started taking some chances, and I sent emails to some of those old friends. I sent one to my eighth grade best friend, and we adored each other. We were each one's matron of honor, in their wedding at 19. So I just said, I just want you to know what's going on. I don't want you to hear it from somebody else. I have a group if you want to join. I mean, she's been the biggest. I forgot how much we loved each other. So bing, one feel good, right? And then I
Yeah.
did it I used to work at this medical center when I was 24. Um, God, I love those people. They were all therapists. They were all silly. They were all introspective. And, here and there, you might talk once every year or two. I wrote them all. I told them all. And I did that with, by the time you're 70, you have a lot of friend groups.
Yeah.
So I just would periodically remember somebody and tell them. And it's as if I'm having a whole reunion now. And some amazing people. I think, how did I ever let them go from my life? They're all on there now. I mean, I have probably close to 200 people on this group. Now, they go in waves if they're interested. Um, and the other cool thing that started happening, at first I thought they were just flattering me, but I've become a good writer because I write regularly. And so some of them are saying, you need to do something with this. What you've been first the journey, and
Hmm.
then you've got to do something with these pearls of wisdom that you've developed. And I still don't know, but then I saw my husband one day. He was copying every single thing from Facebook and putting it in a Word document. And then he went and printed it up and put it in a notebook. And he said, now just do something with it. And so I started reading it. I forgot half the stuff that happened. You know,
Yeah.
you either repress it or the chemo brain, or I think I wish I had kept even more detailed notes.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Maybe to remember, but I can't help but interpret this, Karen, as you taking this life changing and potentially life ending moment or months and potentially years in your life. And what's happening is you're really doing a bunch of stuff that embraces life. You're renewing your relationships. You're reinviting people you haven't connected with for a long
Yes,
time into your
yes.
life. You're doing things that you haven't done previously, in part because of this thing. And in a way, that's seems to me probably contributing to your desire
Recover
to live and your feeling of being alive and being part of community.
completely right. Um, I am happier now than I was before.
Mm,
That's so bizarre. Now, there are plenty of people in my situation that are in pain and they're
yeah,
struggling
yeah,
and they're not having good responses. And so, but the nutritionist they sent me to, 2.5 years ago, handed me a book called Radical Remission. And this woman, Kelly, she's pretty famous now. She went around the world. She says, just like Abraham Maslow and the positive psychology movement. She
yeah.
said, why don't we do this with cancer? Let's interview the people that survive and
Hmm.
find out what they all. So she literally took people that were told they had a few months to live and were sent home without treatment. And these people not only survived, they thrived, and they have, years and years now, they've been living a good life. So she started interviewing hundreds of people. She selected 12 things that they all did. And just to give you one example, one of them was they all changed their diet, but they didn't change it the same way.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny?
Interesting.
It was the change. Their
Yeah.
life changed dramatically when they thought they were going to die, and then they didn't.
Yeah. And it strikes me that even if you're unlucky, or for whatever reason, you do not respond to treatment and you're facing your death, it would still be a good thing to
Good point.
rejuvenate your relationships, to create
Yes.
community, to participate in life as long as you can. And at least you're present and as much as possible enjoying the journey until the end.
Yes, I love that. That reason alone, right. Um,
And that without meaning to offend anyone, because of course there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of loss, there's a lot of suffering involved. But I think what you're saying is no matter what, if you can find ways to feel good, then reach for those ways to feel good.
Boy, I mean, I think that's in a nutshell. I believe there's this zone that I can stay in and I will do better. I felt the same way. And I know it doesn't seem like I would be the type, but I thought, they're not going to want to hear from me. You
Yeah.
know, I knew
Yeah.
her 20 years ago.
Yeah,
They
but
did.
yeah, not only that, Karen, but it felt good to you. And I think what you're saying is you can manage and be aware, have mindfulness and awareness around the things that you are responding to as a human being, not just what your body's responding to in terms of the substances that are going into it, but what your mind is responding to every day. And managing those can have a lot of impact on your well-being.
Yes. So surrounding yourself with kindness and beauty and
Hmm.
nature and, yeah, you're right. It's a whole makeover, really. And
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
makeover for a healthier life, no matter. But back to this coming out, and really
Yeah.
it's about coming out. Through my group, which I called Karen's Green Bean Dream Team, through a little accident that happened one day. Um, like a couple of old college friends were on there, and one, was kept to herself quite a bit, her feelings. And two of them wrote me privately and told me
Hmm.
they too had cancer. Here I
Oh,
was, and I felt
interesting.
almost
Yeah.
embarrassed because here I was, the star of my own show, and they were minor characters suffering alone where they were keeping it private. And we chatted back and forth, and I see it's hard for me to relate to being able to keep something private, frankly.
Yeah.
But then out of the blue, one of them had to have a minor surgery. It was a long-term blood disorder, and she died just like that. She was gone. And it
Mm.
was if it's like no one ever knew that she'd suffered. And I
Yeah.
I felt like she lost so much love. I mean, yes, people loved her, but they didn't know her and what was really going on. And maybe that's the way she wanted it. I have heard that her husband and children have suffered greatly. Um,
So,
but
so you're making another point that I love here, that when you come out, and you called it coming out, when you come out, you're giving other people an opportunity. It's almost a gift to give you the love they might not otherwise have a chance to give you, especially if you
oh,
pass.
true. Oh my gosh, you're right. I mean, the funniest things happened. Presents started rolling in for me. You've got to realize we did this big move to California. So a lot of those old friends were either in Oklahoma or Boston. And so I got a lot of blankets.
Yeah.
And I got, just flowers and plants and cards but they didn't all come at once. That was the funny thing. It would just be at the right time, it felt like. And here's the really crazy thing, and this maybe meant more to me than anything. My children's friends started
Mm.
contacting me. And my son went to business school with a guy who ended up in Africa. And I swear I'd only met him 2 or 3 times, and I struggled to remember which one he was because I met a lot of my son's friends back then, and there were some parties at our house, so they felt our presence even if they didn't, know us that well. He sent me a life-size, I should get it, it's right over there, a life-size teddy bear from Africa.
Oh, how great is that?
And just and they would write notes about, one of them sent me, one sent all these bath bombs and lotions, and these are all kids their age. It was, um that's when you really, this is like, you've heard people say it's too bad for a funeral you don't get to go to your own funeral. Well, that's
Yeah.
what you're saying too about community. They
Yeah.
can tell you all the things they felt. Oh, you're going to love this one. I was I flew back to Tulsa to see my siblings and my mother. And of course, all the high school or college girlfriends that were still around there knew I was coming. And I had had a brief marriage when I was 19. And oh, I mean, it was everything you could imagine that was repulsive. We joked about it because all the bridesmaids were in close to hot pink velvet dresses with big satin bows. And they used to tell me how much they hated me for making them wear these things. And so one was, two were from my high school, one was from another high school. It was a bunch that wouldn't have all known each other. And so one of them, who she'd been sort of my best friend through high school, invited me over and said that she had invited a couple of friends. Well, she had invited all the bridesmaids
Oh, how nice.
from when I'm 19,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they have on pink satin bows, and they made a cake, a wedding cake. And we had, for the little party, we had served colored daiquiris. They made the daiquiris.
Oh, how nice.
And so I think what I'm trying to say is that seeing these old friends they felt so good about themselves that they were doing that for me.
Hmm.
And my sister drove me over and I said, "Oh, come in for a second." She'd been 4 years old and the flower girl. So there she was as a grown woman. So we put her in the picture too.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
tried to recreate the whole picture, but over and over, when you see an old friend, you get life back, memories
Yeah.
back. You start doing, "Oh, remember that time?" And you start remembering yourself as a young woman. And that's important too.
I think there's actually a little bit of research on the power of visualizing yourself as younger or anything that can make you feel like you are your younger self.
Well, do you remember there was a study at Harvard by a professor named George Valiant that took like 80-year-old people. They took them on a bus trip to a place where they had fixed up an entire house like it was the 50s or whatever their era was. And they had the music on the radio and they
Mm.
had the same sorts of foods. And uh, these older people started having more memories and having more cognitive response. George Valiant's study of some, it was really exciting. The dancing, they danced, and the music in particular.
Yeah, and that's in a way, that's exactly what your friends did for you.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
that's
And we were
beautiful.
laughing the same way. It was
Yeah.
wonderful.
I wanted to ask you before we close, I know you have an incredible animal story, and
You're terrible about this. Okay.
would you share it?
I'm going to just preface this. It's a little icky for some people. It was icky for me, frankly. Um, And I will preface this by saying I had, in the 60s, I'd read some of the shamanic stuff, Journey to Exlan, some things like that. So I had a sense of what a shaman was. And then by chance, a friend invited me to go meet a shaman in Mexico. He was from Brazil, and she said he's a real healer. And so there was that experience at that retreat where I learned about not only energy, but I learned about how nature can give you messages, really. And I mean, I just tucked that away and I paid attention whenever I saw things like that. Now, simultaneously, I'd always wanted a lemon tree. And on my dock, everybody had lemon trees. They were in California, so I should have a lemon tree. So we get one from Home Depot. It takes 3 years for a lemon to grow. And my lemon tree had just these teeny little lemons starting to happen. I was never so proud. It blew into the water during a very fierce storm. Just like that, my lemon tree was gone. Now, simultaneously, when we moved into our houseboat, my landlord left with his dog, and then they started digging up the parking lot. And, you know, around the bay, there are rats. I never thought about it, but they live in that mud. And so when they dug up the parking lot, they dug up some of the nest. And with the dog gone, we were a perfect target. And so one night, late at night, I'm downstairs, it's dark, and I see something scurry. I completely freaked out. Call the landlord. I said, I think I've seen a rat. He said, oh, couldn't possibly, probably a mouse. I said, no, this is really a big deal. So he gets the rat guy. There's a rat dog. They close up every hole in the house. And we're so relieved. And we're really even embarrassed to tell anybody about this. It's so creepy, beyond creepy. And so a couple of years went by. Now I've been to the shaman. Now I have cancer. Now everything takes on new meaning. And I go down again on a rainy night. You know, it's just like a movie scene. And again, it's dimly lit. And I'm starting to get a snack. And I see a wet rat scurry across the house again. And that was, I mean, it was just this. Now, I didn't think about it at the time, but let's just imagine the house is the self and the rat as a cancerous thing you want to get rid of. Let's just keep that there. And so we bring another guy out. He closes up the holes, but there's still activity because we've been laying traps, and I put a big apricot slice, and the rat got it. So they're getting in at night, which is even creepier because something is going on in your house that you can't control and you don't know, but it's insidious. And so I took charge. I said, I'm going to put the trap right there. I think that's the hole where it's coming. And so we called the guy again, and we asked permission to remove the whole back of the kitchen counter. He found the nest. He closed it up. We put wire everything. I did that in my book. I got rid of it. The next morning, we look out on the dock, and on the one side is a moldy, fully formed lemon that is washed up. And on the other side is a dead rat. And we think that a seagull had brought it. And it was as if the shamanic fates are saying, sometimes when you have a rat, you make lemonade. I don't know. But it's a story you don't want to tell to everybody. And now I've told it to everybody.
How are your lemon trees doing, or your lemon tree?
Hey, it's gone. It's gone. But I was just telling my husband, everybody's is blooming. Maybe I'm ready now. Maybe I'm ready to get a new lemon tree.
Yeah. Maybe you had to get rid of the rat first.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I love the metaphor. I love the story. I think you're amazing.
I
Say
think you're
again?
amazing. I think you're amazing. This has been
Well,
so much fun. You're so interested in the detail and drawing these connections, and it's really been fun to be heard.
I really appreciate you doing it. Thank you, Karen.
Sure. Bye.
Bye.